Communications spokesman Jason Clare has been holding a media conference that's just started in the last few minutes. Let's take a listen to that now.
Well, another day, another broken promise. This is a day that the government will rue for a very long time. Today, the government is breaking one of its biggest and most important promises. It's breaking its promise to provide everyone with access to the NBN by the end of 2016. This is a government that's barely been in office for 3 months, not even 100 days yet, and yet they are breaking promises left, right and centre. They've broken promises on debt, on boats, on education, and now today on the NBN. And this is a betrayal. This is a broken promise that will hang like an albatross around Malcolm Turnbull's neck. Before the election, the Prime Minister said, and I quote, and people will remember this press conference with Sonny Bill Williams almost there, in April of this year, quote, "Under the coalition, by 2016 there will be minimum download speeds of 25 megabits. We will deliver a minimum of 25 megabits by the end of our first term." Well, today the government is breaking that promise. Before the election they said they would be a government of no excuses. Today they are coming up with the worst of all excuses to break this promise. Before the election they said there'd be no surprises. Well, this is an awful surprise just before Christmas for people around the country who thought they were going to get the NBN by the end of 2016. The Prime Minister said, just after he was elected, quote, "I don't intend on making promises that I won't keep." Well, he's just broken a whopper. He's just broken one of the biggest and most important commitments that he made during the election campaign. And what does all this mean? Breaking promises after less than 100 days on debt, on boats, on education, now on the NBN, it means nothing this government says is worth 2 bob. Well, today I'm going to release the truth. Today I'm releasing the real strategic review into the government's second-rate NBN. This document here is the unadulterated, unamended, uncensored view of NBN Co, of the coalition government's second-rate dodgy NBN plan. This was written before Malcolm Turnbull sacked the experts building the NBN at NBN Co and put his mates in to give him the report that he wanted. And this is the report that the minister doesn't want you to see. It's the secret advice handed to Malcolm Turnbull just weeks into the job, used to prepare the incoming minister's government brief. And it hasn't been released until now. Now, the minister said this is old advice. This advice is dated the 20th of September this year. It's a 154-page document, very detailed. And funny enough, it doesn't say what Malcolm Turnbull said today. It paints a very different picture, and it's scathing of the coalition government's dodgy second-rate fibre-to-the-node plan. It says 7 things that I want to draw to your attention now. First, it says building the NBN in 2 stages is the wrong approach and it's not recommended. It says that it would cost more and take longer. Second, it says the coalition's promise that all Australians will have access to 25 megabits by 2016 is, quote, unlikely to happen. We know this report is true because the minister has just told us that today. He has broken the promise he made to the Australian people before the election to give everyone access to the NBN by the end of 2016. Third, the report says the coalition's plan will result in lower revenues of up to 30%, which will impact on the ability of NBN Co to raise debt. Fourth, it says no one knows how much it will cost to fix Telstra's old copper network so that it can be used for the NBN. Not Telstra, not the government, not NBN Co itself. It also says that the cost of maintaining the old copper network is estimated between $600 million a year and $900 million a year. Or to put that another way, that's between $6 and $9 billion over the next decade. 6, it says the coalition's promise of minimum speeds of 50 megabits per second by 2019 can't be guaranteed using copper. And 7, it says the coalition's slower speeds would compromise the provision of telehealth, distance education and other business applications. All up, what this report says is that the coalition's plan for a second-rate NBN is a dud. It was a dud when they announced the plan in April this year, and it's a dud today. Worse than that, it's a broken promise. The promise that everyone would have access to the NBN by the end of 2016 has now been broken. And so what we know from this report and what we know from what the Minister has told us today is that their promise to build the NBN by the end of 2016 has been broken, that the NBN will now make less money than promised, that it won't meet the needs of business and it won't meet the needs of families, and in the end it's going to be up to Labor to come back and finish the job. I'll hand over to Michelle to say a few words, then happy to take your questions.
Well, this is indeed a broken promise, and in doing so, in breaking this promise, Malcolm Turnbull has pulled the plug on millions of Australians having access to high-speed broadband. He has pulled the plug on high-speed broadband for people who need it most and left them in broadband limbo. And what we are left with in this announcement today by the Minister is effectively a patchwork of copper, a patchwork of other technologies which are not suitable for the high-speed broadband economy that we need to develop in Australia. And I say this because you need to cast your mind back to when the Liberals were last in government, and for something like 12 years they had nearly 20 different broadband plans, none of which worked, all of which left Australia in a broadband backwater compared to our regional neighbours and the rest of the world. It was this untenable situation that required Labor to act to devise a truly ubiquitous national broadband network. This is not a national broadband network. This is indeed fraudband. It is a fraud on the Australian people who have again today been betrayed by another broken promise. And one of the reasons why it is so bad for Australia is because the NBN, of course, was supposed to and was indeed designed on the policy premise of getting rid of the digital divide, not only between regional areas and urban areas, but also within metropolitan areas, by delivering equivalent wholesale pricing. Well, how you're going to do that under this patchwork of fraudband is completely beyond anyone. So in this broken promise today, we have a government that is clearly not committed to developing the economy we need for the 21st century, on today of all days, when we've seen the effects of an economy in transition. We need to have a government that plans for the future, that is forward-looking, that keeps to its promises and actually delivers what Australians and the Australian economy needs.
Okay, happy to take your questions.
In this document you've provided today, it says, as is reflected in the strategic review today, that achieving 25 megabits per second by 2016 is unlikely. So that matches the strategic review. So how is this different to what has come out in the strategic review today? Oh,
well, it's very different. That's the unadulterated, uncensored, unamended truth. It tells us that it was impossible, or at least very unlikely, that the government was ever going to be able to implement its election commitment. And the government has known this. Everyone I've spoken to since I became Shadow Minister has told me the chances of this government implementing this promise are near zero. So they must have known when they told the Australian people in April that they wouldn't be able to meet this commitment. But they disregarded that and went to the Australian people making a promise they knew they couldn't deliver. And this is not the only broken promise this government has made. We're not 100 days into this government and they're breaking promises like it's going out of style. Breaking promises on debt, breaking promises on boats, breaking promises on education, and now breaking promises on the NBN. Now, this is like going down to the shops and getting a bottle of milk and it says the use-by date is the end of the week, and you think, oh, this will be okay to use, and you go home, and you taste it, and it's already off. This government's already off. It's breaking so many promises that people are losing trust in it already.
This obviously hasn't just fallen into your lap today. Why have you chosen now?
Well, I think it's important that people know the truth. I tried only moments ago to table this document in the Australian Parliament, and Malcolm Turnbull refused to let me. Now, if Malcolm Turnbull was really interested in transparency, really interested in making sure that people know the truth, he would have allowed me to release this document. If he was really interested in people knowing the truth about the NBN, he would release his incoming minister's brief. I asked him to do that in the Parliament and he's refused to do so. So this is a government that's not interested in transparency at all. It's one of the most secret governments in the history of the Federation. You just have to look at other areas. John Curtin released more information of a national security related to national security during World War II than this government is releasing in relation to the boats. Everything is secret. Nothing is released, and this is more evidence of it.
But you've had it for obviously a week or two. I mean, have you released it today just obviously to take the impact away from the release of their NBN?
A lot of the information in this report has already been reported. The Sydney Morning Herald and The Age and ZNet, but there's new information in this report and I thought that it was important to bring it to people's attention. One of the things I've been telling Malcolm Turnbull is you can't move from a fibre to the premises model to a fibre to the node model unless you know how much it's going to cost. And the only way to know how much it's going to cost is if you know how much it's going to cost to maintain the old copper network. Remember, they're building fibre to a box in the street and then they're going to use the fibre, they're going to use the copper all the way to people's houses. Now, the reason Malcolm Turnbull's report fails today is he doesn't tell us how much it's going to cost. He relies on assumptions and international comparisons. This report that I'm releasing today tells us how much it's going to cost. It says it's between $600 million and $900 million a year. And that's an awfully large figure. $6 to $9 billion now of taxpayers' money to be spent on keeping an old copper network going when it could be spent on building fibre to people's homes.
The strategic review, which was done by NBN and independent consultants, was quite damning of the previous management of the rollout of the NBN network. It said that the targets were wildly optimistic and that the financial estimates were, in some cases, incorrect. Do you accept any responsibility as the previous government in charge of it for those findings?
Well, Joanne, I'll say two things. First, we've got two reports here. You've got the corporate plan, 2013 to 2016, that says the cost of the NBN, the CapEx cost, $37.4 billion. Then you've got the report that the minister's released today that turns the numbers around and says it's 73. This is a report that's been prepared by NBN Co, approved by the board, including two members that are still on the board, verified by Treasury and Finance, had KPMG and Ernst & Young look at it as well. And this report has been drafted and prepared by a man that Malcolm Turnbull owns a yacht with. Now, I know which report that I trust. In relation to rolling out of the NBN, I've made the point 2 or 3 times that construction has fallen behind and it needs to be fixed. But fix it we must, not throw it out. This is the right project for Australia's future. It's infrastructure of the 21st century. Tony Abbott says he wants to be the infrastructure Prime Minister. Well, you can't be the infrastructure Prime Minister if you're going to tear down the NBN, and that's effectively what they're doing here in this report.
The authors of the review were biased?
I'm sorry?
Do you think the authors of the strategic review were biased?
Do I think?
The authors of the strategic review were biased?
Were biased? Well, I asked a question in the Parliament yesterday. I said, do you think it's really right that someone that you own a yacht with should be in charge of writing a strategic review into the NBN? And if the minister was interested in transparent information, then he would have allowed me in the Parliament today to release this other document that tells us that the Coalition's plan for the NBN is a shocker and can't be implemented.
So just to confirm, this is the Ministerial Blue Book?
This is the advice prepared by NBN Co and given to the department to prepare the Blue Book.
Is there commercially sensitive topics inside, and what steps have you taken to make sure that they're not in there?
No, to the best of my knowledge, it doesn't.
Have you redacted any information that you may feel?
And it's in your hands now.
On changing the priority to turn it round to areas that are underserviced now?
Oh, look, you won't get disagreement from me about prioritising areas in greatest need, but I've visited places around the country where they can't even get ADSL, and they were supposed to get fibre to their home before Christmas. They've been taken off the NBN rollout map. These are places where work should be continuing, but it has stopped. This is part of the problem. Now what we find out is not only has Malcolm Turnbull broken the promise to deliver the NBN by the end of 2016, but he's also broken the promise to provide fibre to the node to almost 9 million households. Now what he said was we would provide access to the NBN via the HFC network over the next 3 years and then build over that by building a fibre to the node network for all Australia, 9 million households. He broke that promise today. He's no longer going to do that. And that means for many Australians who live in Sydney and Melbourne and Brisbane, who've got the Foxtel cable that's running down their street, they'll need to rely on that now for the NBN. And there's problems with that. There are gaps in that network. Is it going to be an open access network where all RSPs are going to be able to provide a service to Australians who want the NBN? And who will pay for the coax cable from the telegraph pole to the house? They're all questions the Minister needs to answer.
You concede that Labor probably didn't have its priorities right in the way it rolled out the plan.
No. If you ask the NBN Co, what they will say is that they rolled out the NBN in a way that engineering, in an engineering sense, was the way it needed to be implemented. There's about 120 points of interconnection, and it's been built around the points of interconnection. The point I'm making, Gab, is that there are places in Australia which can't even get ADSL at the moment that are now in limbo because of the decisions that this government has taken.
In terms of fibre to the node, as the coalition sort of made out that their sort of plan was going to be pre-election, do you welcome the fact that they are going to have up to about 25% fibre to the premises?
Well, it should be more than that. It should be 93%. And this is the main problem I have with this government. Not just that. The fact that they promised one thing and now they're doing another. You've heard Labor members, Labor shadow ministers say day after day that this is not the government that they said they would be. Whether it's on debt, whether it's on education, whether it's on boats, or whether it's on this, on the NBN. They promised one thing and they're doing another. They promised that they would roll out the NBN to everyone by the end of 2016, and now they're ripping that up and throwing it away, and the people of Australia should hold them to account for that.
What about the fact that it's looking like it's just going to go towards business communities, the fibre to the premises part?
Well, you know my view about this. Labor's policy is that fibre is the answer. Fibre is the end game. Ask most experts in this area and they'll tell you the same thing. Fibre is the end game. So the question is, do you do it in one stage or two? We've adopted the approach that it should be done in one stage. The government's view is that it should be done in two stages. Ask Malcolm Turnbull, ask Ziggy Sukowski, and they'll tell you that fibre is the end game. The question is, when do you do it? And our argument is it makes sense to do it now.
The Minister said fibre was the end game, but it was fantasy land because of the high cost of putting fibre to every home. So you think the cost is worth it?
Well, I'll take my advice from something that Mike Quigley said last week, where he made the point, and this is a point that's been made in the past, that it's not easy to convert fibre to the node to fibre to the premises. When you do this in two stages, you've got the cost of fixing and maintaining the old copper network. You've got the cost of all of the wasted investment, something like 60 to 80,000 boxes that have got to be built in people's streets. You've got the loss of efficiencies of scale of doing two builds, not one, and then the loss of productivity from people not being able to use the NBN for what they might have, for teleconferencing, for distance education, for telehealth. I think about my own experience in the construction industry. I think about the M5 East project in Sydney. People who know the M5 East know that it was built too small, 2 lanes in each direction, 2 tunnels. As soon as it opened, people realised they'd made a mistake and it was already congested. And it clogged up the road system and it limited productivity. Trucks would be providing more services to and from the port if they could move freely through that corridor. Now, the New South Wales government and the federal government now admit that that was a mistake, and they've come up with WestConnex, which is designed to fix that. But that'll take another 10 years before that comes to fruition. So I make the point here, we need to think not just about today, but tomorrow, because it will come sooner than we think.
Are you expecting any consequences from releasing this today? Or is it free to release?
Well, the consequence I'm expecting is that there'll be a lot of angry people around Australia who thought they were getting the NBN by the end of 2016 and now know they can't trust anything this government says.
Do you think the public will be thinking after this political debate that really they're never going to see NBN in most areas of Australia? It's so bound now by politics.
Look, it's not politics that's the problem here. It's the fact that you can't trust what the government has said. A couple of weeks ago, I made the point that we had won this debate. 3 years ago, Tony Abbott said that Malcolm Turnbull's job was to demolish the NBN. And I said, look, they've moved a long way. Their election promise was 15 times what they promised to fund in 2010. They promised to keep the NBN. I made the point at the time that this issue is a bit like Medicare. The government knows that it's too popular to destroy, but they're doing almost everything they can here to destroy it. And it means we're going to get a second-rate NBN from this government, and that's why people will be angry.
The government released the terms of reference for the cost-benefit analysis today, and one of the terms of reference was to look at the role of government in continuing the rollout. Do you think that there might be a situation where we see the private sector become more involved in the rollout and perhaps government ownership of NBN Co being reduced?
Well, we'll wait and see. We'll wait and see. We'll see what comes of that. We'll watch the cost-benefit analysis with interest. Okay. Thanks, everyone. Merry Christmas.
Rightio, that was the Opposition Communications spokesman Jason Clare there with MP Michelle Rowland responding to Malcolm Turnbull's release of the NBN review just in the last few hours. The Labor MPs questioning the credibility of that review. And we're expecting Malcolm Turnbull, the Communications Minister, to step up for a media conference in the next few minutes. It's a live shot you can see there from Parliament House in Canberra, so we'll cross there live just as soon as that begins. Political leaders are gathering in Canberra, demanding money from the Prime Minister to soften the blow of Holden's withdrawal. The company will end 65 years of car making in Australia within 4 years.